Perfect. Hi everyone, my name's Chmba Ellen Chilembe. I am the founder and director of Tiwale. I'm also a music producer and a DJ and just an activist in the space that, in the idea that I love to engage in spaces that help build communities that uplift each other and create just more equitable living around the world. Excuse that door. Don't usually slam doors like that. But yeah, so I'll start first with just talking a little bit about Tiwale, and then we can go into this beautiful conversation that I have today with Africa Mothers. Before I also begin, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to be able to share our work at Tiwale as well as my work as a DJ and producer. And so, yeah, it's just an exciting space. And thank you for creating this space, Africa Mothers. I'll go ahead and start a presentation. All right, so this is Tiwale. Tiwale means let's light up. The idea behind it was to create a space that allows people to freely think and really just have ideas and dreams bursting within their mind. So the idea of Tiwale is that light bulb, but in a sense, it's sort of the mind just becoming freer and more liberated. And my journey with Tiwale started when I was 16. It was actually, Tiwale was a concept and the idea that the first initial program was a prototype of an idea that I dreamt of implementing later in life. When I was 16, I just finished reading Dr. Muhammad Yunus's book, Grameen Bank, um, Banker to the Poor, where he had just won the Nobel Peace Prize for starting Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. And I just remember seeing the transformation of how Bangladesh had gone through this period of being very vulnerable in terms of the different circumstances people were facing. There were floods, but also um, very, very, very critical poverty lines, and just there was an overall hunger as well as income crisis. And so seeing what Grameen Bank had done for women in Bangladesh and how the microfinance initiative had helped create this space of equal income access, I thought, oh, we could use the same in Malawi. And with Malawi, what was particularly concerning me was that, so in 2012, when Tiwale started, child marriage was still legal here. And because it was still legal, we also saw an extra dropout at secondary school level. So when you look at primary school attendance in Malawi, especially then, what we had was we had a 114% attendance. And in a sense, it was that you had adults going back to primary school. So it was over 100, 114. And then at secondary school level, you had this massive drop to only 33% of secondary school aged people who should be in secondary school, attending secondary school. And when you looked at girls, particularly from those stats, only 6% of secondary school aged girls were attending secondary school. And the reason behind that was that what you saw, because primary school was free, you had this over attendance. And then at secondary school level where there was a fee, you had this massive dropout. And usually that age when you enter secondary school here is around 12, 13, 14, sometimes 15. And so also a lot of families were encouraged, because child marriage was also legal, that, my daughter should just get married. So the stats were worse for young women. And so while thinking about Grameen Bank and then also seeing the crisis at home, I started researching on how we could possibly implement a microfinance program. I was talking to one woman here in this photo, Mercy Howard. Mercy, that time, she was 19 with 3 children. And the program was supposed to help girls stay in school. So she was helping me find young women in school. But what was very visible then was, well, as much as we want to work with young women who are in school so that they don't go through the same cycle of dropping out, because it's hard to think about ways that we can organize with them while they're in school. And then there's this time factor. Here are young women that presently have dropped out and are at home and they're looking for something to do. They're looking for opportunities. And so we're talking to Messi. We agreed that she should find 9 other women and we should start a small business education workshop. And then from that, we can go through starting a small microfinance program. And the idea was that everyone would get a small interest-free loan and then start a business. And so that was the plan. And we agreed to meet on a Monday at a school in Siliza where Tiwale is based. And I remember that Monday, it was 1 p.m., very hot, hot day in Malawi. Like it is hot right now. And I'm walking over to Messi, and there's just this long line of women. It was going, it was a long line. I just thought, maybe there's probably some kind of event that's happening there. Maybe, yeah, maybe there's something that was going on before. And so that's why Messi's there with all these people. And she just waved at me, like waving at me to come over. And so the moment I got over, she's like, well, so this is everyone. And that day, there were 150 women that were waiting to participate in this program, which was amazing, but also, whew, I just, yeah. So remember, this is 16-year-old me seeing this. It was quite overwhelming. And obviously also the money that we were working with for the 10 people was not going to work for a group of 150 women. And so from there, the plan was that, okay, we're going to continue this program, but we'll turn it into sort of like a competition, a business competition where everyone will go through the business education program. But because we don't have enough money, we'll ask people to be in teams of 3 and then come up with a business plan together. And once they get loans, then they can repay the loans. And it worked out. It was phenomenally powerful just how everything came together. We had people just come in to volunteer and help teach some of the business classes from the University of Malawi that were studying business. We had a school give us space where we could host some of the workshops. And also the women pushed and went to our district commissioner to get Tiwale registered. And so there was this push to really make this something long-term. And so Tiwale got registered for Siliza community, and we are obviously based in Malawi, where I'm from. So the way the program works, the business education program, we adopted some of the lessons from the African Leadership Academy's entrepreneurship and leadership course, where what we were trying to do was not only just make people think about starting a business, but rather think about what are the needs within the community, what are your needs, who are you trying to be, what is your long-term path, how are you trying to step up for your community and sort of be a transformative changing force. And so also you can imagine that we are working with people that most of them had left home around age 11 and 12, and they were told, you're going to marry this person and you will do whatever they say and be a good obedient partner. And so we're working with a group that has gone through this trauma of really being told that your dreams are secondary and who you want to be is secondary. And so the leadership part was really important in terms of just building that sense of creating space for self-desires, for dreams, and for people to be truly who they want to be and know that they are valid and their dreams are valid and that they have potential to transform the community and Malawi overall and the world. And so the program was 2 weeks. We had the empowerment stuff, just the self-leadership, and then also we had educational, entrepreneurial things, the need finding process, obviously. We did some of the business nitty-gritty stuff. We went into the community, we asked questions, and the kind of businesses that people came up with in their teams of 3, they were mostly small scale based on the amount of money that we had. Then we were giving each group $50, and the plan was that they would repay $5 for 10 weeks. And so, for instance, one group would buy a crate of 1,000 fish at 10,000 Malawi kwacha. So $50 was equivalent to 15,000 Malawi kwacha. And when they got the $50, they had 15,000. So they were spending 10,000 to get 1,000 fish, and they were selling each one at 30,000. And so they were making 30,000 at the end of the day, which is like they were making $100. So they were able to repay that $50 back and also save their own $50 on the side in a day. Another group was buying chicken pieces. They were buying a chicken for 1,500 Malawi kwacha. They would cut it into 18 pieces, sell each piece, and were making 3,240. So they were also doubling. And they were so all teams that we worked with. So we started with 4 teams of 3, and so that's 12 people, and was able to each team was done by 8 weeks instead of the 10 weeks, and the best team was done in 4 weeks, while 2 teams were done in 6 weeks, and then the last team was done in 8 weeks. And so it was just visible that yes, if you give women access to do exactly the kind of transformation or the kind of work that they want to do, if you give them the financial access, because that was what was lacking, was the this is a these are people that it would be hard to get a loan at the bank because you don't really have much to show for collateral. And then with the way the systems are set up here, it really gives income access just extra difficult in accessing. So that was the microloan program. And of course, now that we had also become an organization, there was still the reason why we started was education. And we were trying to figure out ways that we can really, really still push for either some of our participants to go back to school or at least not have more people joining Tiwale because they've also dropped out of school. And so we started a program where we'd pair people up with someone in Malawi or around the world to to give them an education grant, which was $100 to $200 so that they can go back to school. And the way the way it would work is that, especially being Tiwale, where we are based in Siliza and we're working a lot also with young mothers, what we found was that with the school attendance, it became difficult in the sense that it was difficult for people to leave their homes and leave children and then go to school, even though there was a grant for it. There was just that challenge in terms of attendance. The schools were too far, and then some people were much older and they said, oh, now I'm in a classroom full of kids and they're laughing at me and pointing at me. So there were those kinds of challenges. But also as Tiwale, we had this microfinance program. It was interest free, and so we weren't really making anything out of it. And so we were struggling as an organization as well in terms of how do we continue to offer all these programs and also manage a team and make sure that the team is taken care of. And so we started a new model where the idea was since we were a remote program, we were renting space from the school and just having all these classes happen there. And some of the workshops were happening outside. We wanted to find a way that we could get our own space. And one of the women in our group had learned how to tie dye. And so she was willing to share the skills. She just needed access to the materials. And so we made her a tutor and she started hosting tie-dye workshops. My late mother also became very much involved in terms of teaching some of the workshops. She brought in some trainers also from Tanzania, as well as helped us source materials. And so from that, we had 77 women enrolled in this class. And the way it would work was that we would make a tapestry, and then the tapestries became viral among university students. They used them as dorm decorations. Even sometimes families as well would buy them and use them to put on a couch to protect it, or just as home decor. We had some people that were designing clothes from them. And so these tapestries were really successful for Tiwale. They were an income for the organization. They were an income for the women, as well as also they helped support our expenses. And with that, we were able to buy land in Siliza and started the construction of this women's center that we now have. And the center, we were able to finish it from a follow-up grant that came from Glamour magazine. After they saw that we were at window level, they were like, okay, we want to help you complete this center and space and open up. And so this is us on our first day of opening the space, just jamming out. We do love to jam, but I'll talk about that aspect of Tiwale in just a little bit. But the idea with the center was that, so the reason why we started was education. And we had a challenge with giving out school grants because people had the challenge of families and other responsibilities and not being able to leave the community and go to a school that's far away. And so what we did at the center was provide those full-time secondary school classes at hours that are convenient for especially women with those kinds of responsibilities. And so we had classes in the afternoon and in the evening for when you're done with the chores, and there's also someone to help around the home so that you can comfortably take a class. I think I'm frozen. Okay, cool. No longer frozen. And then part of the goals also of the space was to get a community library going, a computer lab, start a community garden, which yeah, which we've set up the library. We have the garden. The computer lab is big goals, but we're getting there. But so yeah, that's sort of been Tiwale. And where we are presently, we offer the full-time secondary school classes. We do offer the workshops. We've done sewing workshops. We've done tie and dye workshops. And of course, also with COVID, we've obviously had to pause some of our gathering classes. But an opportunity that did come out from our sewing workshop was that, well, we had paused and we're in the moment where, okay, cool. So the months are passing and there's a strong demand for face masks, especially once we started seeing how the virus was taking over most of Europe, taking over the US. There was this pressure, and we thought, "Oh, why don't we figure out exactly how we can work around designing a face mask that is safe, that is approved by the Ministry of Health here, and that can be distributed to people, especially workers who still have to go to work, that cannot afford to have a face mask." And so that's sort of been what we're up to presently, where in the corner, that's the Tiwale graduate, Lydia Tembo, and she's been leading the face mask making program. And so far, actually yesterday we just did a count. So far we've made 18,000 face masks, which have been donated to community health workers. We've been working with the Ministry of Health where they identify organizations, spaces such as 2 weeks ago, we gave masks to the maternity wing at our main hospital here, Kamuzu Central Hospital. And then about a couple more weeks ago, we went and distributed some masks to 10 schools in a district that's just very, very vulnerable in terms of income access. So it's been a journey, but of course, now as spaces start to get more creative about safety, and also as the world starts to open up, we're still in some of our goals of really creating the space that continues to provide ways for people to uplift themselves. And with Tiwale, one thing that we're looking into is the music space. So we see a huge opportunity in terms of the music industry where
We seem we seem to have lost the speaker. I will try to get her on, and then we can continue with the discussion. In the meantime, if you are able, oh, she's here. Ellen? Apologies for the technical glitch. I'm sure our speaker is back on now, and we should be able to continue.
Okay.
Is this so, Ellen?
Yes, yes. Sorry about that. I think the internet must have just gone out for a second. But I'll just resume where I was if that's okay.
Perfect.
Right. Luckily enough for us, we were almost done. So, all right. Sorry everybody about that. But what I was saying was that there's such a huge opportunity with the music space. We're starting to see a lot of draw to the African sound. We saw Beyonce's Lion King album. We've seen artists like Burna Boy getting international artists. We've seen just lots of spaces, like when you look at viral videos such as from Joseph's John Cena, where there's this hunger for the African sound, for the African feel, and we need to make sure that we're at the forefront of it. Where when you look at festivals like Global Citizen coming to the continent and being in Joburg, making sure that the people producing that festival are also from the community. So it just doesn't become one of those things that uses our culture and our heritage and our talent but doesn't really employ our community. And so what we're trying to do with Tiwale is we've started a program, a music program, where we're teaching DJ and music production classes for women and other non-binary people. And with that space, the way we're looking at it is we've done some creative collaborations with festivals and companies just to be able to also create a direct employment slash internship opportunity for the people that will be graduating from the program to then enter the music space. And so, yeah, that's sort of a big overview of Tiwale from the beginning in 2012 to sort of navigating the times and challenges, to navigating COVID, and now also navigating continuously changing opportunities and spaces in the world, and how we're trying to continuously create a space for our community as well as just for women across the continent and other non-binary people. So thank you for that. I'll stop sharing and get into a conversation. Oh,
We seem to be losing our speaker here and there. I'm guessing it's an internet connection, but do send us through your questions through the chat, as if you have any questions so far, or if you have any questions related to women empowerment and it moving from dialogue to action. And I see she is back, and we can just continue as soon as you're ready. But
oh,
yeah, please do share your questions in the chat for long.
absolutely. I'm so sorry for the network issues, everyone. It's one of those things you can never get right. Okay, so I'm actually done with the presentation. I'm not sure if you lost me for the last part, but we can jump into the discussion. Hello, can you still hear me? I'm not sure if I've frozen out.
Apologies for that glitch. Signal seems to be against us today, but we will go straight into the Q&A. We have some prepared questions that we would like to ask. I'm not sure if you want me to maybe read them to you, then you respond, or if you'd want to read them and reply.
No, I just thought it was a discussion, so you can, yeah, either way is fine. So that's
Cool,
okay.
I'm here, so I can read them to you. So the first question we had was, how do you measure women empowerment? Yeah, as you understand the question, I think you can then answer without me elaborating.
Sure. I mean, there's not really definitive ways or data that you would say, okay, we're targeting collecting this and that, and it's really also, it really depends on exactly what are we trying to see in the world and what are we trying to create more, voila, more. And so, when we think about women empowerment within our organization, but also personally, when I think about it, it's rather um, it's really about dismantling these limitations that are based on gender. And so it even goes beyond just women empowerment, rather, really, it's empowerment of humans of all identities, all minorities, the LGBTQ community, people who are living with disabilities. It's about making sure we create a world that everyone has equal access to income, to various platforms, various services. And so, the largest, biggest minority in the world is people that identify as women, but all of those intersect in a way where we need to navigate the class that has been created and the systems that have been to upload to uphold that class, and so things such as patriarchy, things such as capitalism. And so in terms of measurement, it can vary based on how far are you willing to dismantle those systems within your community. And so there's no proper way to say how you measure it, but rather how far are you meeting your goals. And so with us, it's about creating spaces where people can be free and talk freely and be fully liberated. And so what we look at is how much of a safe space have we become as a community.
Cool. I like your explanation. So following up on that, I would like to then ask you, so we are saying that we're moving from dialogue to action, but isn't dialogue in and of itself also a form of empowerment?
I absolutely agree that just dialogue is, you know, sometimes the way people can be disempowered is through silencing. And so the moment you start that dialogue, the moment sometimes it's even just about saying this is wrong. There's so many things that are wrong, and it's funny that we've had to sometimes we've had people found like as founders of a theory, or people have as discoverers of certain knowledge, when it is knowledge that if we would move from a place of operating from our hearts to seeing exactly what change we want, then we would immediately know that okay, this doesn't feel right. Someone should say it, and so starting that dialogue is actually number one step towards just breaking down systems that shouldn't be.
Oh, I like what you say, that it is actually the first step and not actually the whole thing, because we do have a lot of dialogues in the continent, and it's important that we also move to action. But I will not take over your session. The next question that we had is that, and you mentioned it yourself, that the most disempowered people in the African continent are usually those who identify as women. And we've seen women be at the forefront of every other struggle for racial justice, for the fight against police brutality. Everywhere where you look, you see women. But when the struggle is against women specifically, you very seldom see them having support from other people, or people identify anything outside of being a woman. So do you think that enough is being done to empower and support African women in the African continent in terms of supporting their struggles and supporting their empowerment?
So I just want to highlight what I said, where uh, I meant the most visible, in terms of the most visible minority group is women. But then, there's people are going through different struggles. People with albinism are going through various struggles in Tanzania and Malawi. But then, because they're a smaller community, they're not as visible. The LGBTQ community are not as visible. People with disabilities are not as visible. But I think the most visible discrimination is that against women. So because of that, that's why there is a wider movement. I think yes, yes, I agree that the support isn't there, but also what I would add is exactly who are we looking for the support from, where in the sense that we can't expect to, we can't actually in the song that you referenced from my EP, Adele says a line where it says, "Can it still be called freedom if I beg for it?" And I think about that a lot. Where who exactly, when when we're asking for liberation, who are we asking for liberation from? Who are we asking to give us this space? And so are we just trying to fit into those spaces, and exactly what more can we do? And so as much as there might not be support, we shouldn't let a lack of support then say that, well, then the movement, the movement has failed in a sense. But rather the movement should take charge from demanding, from charging that this is what is happening, and then the support should follow. And so in the sense of us not having enough support, that's okay. The most that we need is us.
Wow, I really like that song, and I particularly agree with how you are articulating it. That who are we looking for solidarity from, and is this solidarity now validating the whole movement? And I think that's a conversation that would be very interesting to have. So the next question that we have, and I mean, it's important. It makes it brings in a bit of more context, taking into consideration what you just said now, that now we find women who are within traditional roles, and not to say traditional roles are oppressive in any way, but some women, like you said, are told, okay, you can just have children and not go to school. That's enough for you. So how do you go about, especially through the work that you do, how do you go about and like enlightening women to say that yes, you need empowerment beyond your traditional role, and that you can still be empowered and still be able to fulfill your role as a wife, as a mother, but still have other avenues. So I don't know if the question is clear, but through your work and in the context where you work with women who are in these traditional roles, how do you go about first informing them or enlightening them that they do need empowerment? And then what is the step that you then follow thereafter?
Thank you so much for that, and yeah, thank you for that overview as well. So, with traditional roles, it's always a challenge on how to safely navigate, in the sense that what's fascinating about tradition is that when we say, this is a tradition, this is the way things are done, we think about it as the only way to be and the only way to exist, as the only way, that there is no alternative. You have to do this. When we say tradition, like, that's the thing with that word. And what's really think and dream, because they've been told this is the way things are done. And so when approaching people that feel very tied to a tradition, it's not about saying like, this is wrong, what you've been taught. I mean, there's some things that are wrong, such as child marriage, and that had to be criminalized. But then in a sense, the way we navigate it is not to come in as a force, but rather to show those other alternatives of being. Because when you break out of like, oh, you know what, I actually don't want to act this way. I actually feel better when I talk this way. Or, okay, actually, now I'm realizing that my anger was okay. There's space for my anger. I don't always have to be polite to be accepted into a space. When you do that, you're allowing yourself to imagine. With Tiwale is that, we give people this chance and the space to step into roles that normally wouldn't be given. And because of that, then they're able to say, okay, cool, there's this traditionally, but then also there's this that I'm seeing myself in. Then they make that choice. But the thing with tradition is that it's it's the limit of people not being able to see beyond who they presently are. And what we need to do when we navigate tradition is just ensuring that we're giving that human right of access to information. So, it could there's some traditional things that you can align with, but making sure that that person makes a full informed choice after accessing every source of information to stay in this lens. And so that's how we navigate it, is making sure that, okay, this is what you want to do, Mike, but are you fully informed in what opportunities and options are out there for you, and that this isn't just the way it has to be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and well, this is not a question that we had asked you, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. So, I had a conversation once with someone, and they were saying, why is it that we are forcing women to assume male roles? And I think, for instance, in traditional settings like that, where it has been said that a man does this and a woman does that, it could be seen as though we are masculating women.
Mm.
What is your opinion on that?
You know, it actually, yeah, very much well ties into the last question. So thank you for bringing that up. Is that, this person is assuming that these roles are for men. And so, in a sense, they are also in that one-sided view where they haven't been given the full information. Someone came in and set up these roles and said this is that and this is that, set up the system of patriarchy, and so they are very much within that. And so, maybe someone could ask that, why aren't men being allowed to also pursue these roles that would be considered womanly, quote unquote? And so, there's also oppression there in the opposite sense. That um, but the problem is that there's that one lens of what a woman should be, and that's what we need to target first in terms of breaking. And that also starts with dialogue first, which you did.
I absolutely like I like what you were saying, that you need first to be enlightened, you need first to be empowered for you to be able to empower others. And like you said, that ties into the next and last question. If anybody has questions, whether you are joining us via Facebook or joining us on Zoom, feel free to leave a comment or leave your question in the chat. We still have a few more minutes in the session for us to tackle any questions that you may have. So the last question from our end is basically that a lot of organizations say, especially now, a lot of organizations are coming up and they're saying we are for women empowerment, or we're for the protection of women and children. But when you look at the work that they do, it doesn't necessarily communicate the same message. So we just wondered with the team as we're preparing these to say, should there be a regulatory system that, in quoting from your previous answer, that kind of looks at how empowered an organization is? Are they able to actually render the services that they say they want to render? For instance, if you are in law enforcement, there's a lot of regulation there. So should there be a regulatory system like that? Do you think it would be a good thing or a bad thing?
You know, I thought about that question for some time, and you know, the reason why it's taken so much thinking was, I mean, you know, just thinking about it overall, it also meant also asking questions on exactly who will regulate what a space that empowers women looks like, but also, you know, all these companies and organizations are jumping in presently to diversify, to you know, add women to the table because there is this external pressure from consumers, and you know, you don't want to look like the bad company, you don't want to be hashtagged all male panel, and so because of that, there's now this like, okay, cool, how do we become more inclusive? And so then they copy what other people are doing, but it's because all of this is coming from a lack of internal intention that then you still continue to face challenges even within the layers of the so-called empowerment that's been created within the space. And so what we need to look at is, you know, we need to look at the root of how these companies and spaces and organizations were set up initially, where when you were setting up this company, what kind of historical background did you have that made you feel comfortable setting up a company that did not include women, that did not include black people, that wasn't accessible for people with disabilities, where you just felt full comfort in having a space that was that and not seeing a challenge in the world. So we need to go also into the history of these spaces and sort of unwrap and heal from that history that was built based on oppression, that sought to create profit, that leveled up based on oppression. And so, you know, with regulating, we'll have to go through that history. And then, honestly, I think once we're able to do that and really ensure that the people that haven't been included in that space previously are now fully safe within the space, that they can fully advocate for themselves, then there won't be need for a regulatory board because the healing will have been done and the founding would have come from a space that's fully inclusive, but also with continuous learning. But again, it's something to keep thinking of. It's a very difficult question.
Yeah, indeed. And I actually think that it brings back the conversation to the point of saying, should we be rebuilding organizations, like creating organizations from scratch, like you did with Tiwale, or should we be looking into being included in existing organizations? Again, that is a conversation for another day. So in the absence of any more questions, I will just give you a chance also to just share with us your concluding remarks. And yeah, over to you again.
All right. No, thank you. And truly, I am going to probably think about that much more as a question on, yeah, rebuilding or creating. And you know, they both have their own necessities in different lenses. But yeah, just for me, this space has been great. It's been great to be able to share what Tiwale is doing, our journey, and how we're navigating creating spaces of equality in who is present and who is given power, and also to be able to have this conversation to be able to dwell into these thoughts and really think deeply. Sometimes it's rare just to have a space that's creatively thinking about how we can shake up our world for a better space. And so thank you for creating a space that's centered around the continent, around as people around Africa to be a better, just a better, more accessible, also more thriving continent. So, I just saw a note that there's a question. Okay, the question is, how are women empowered as when we say we are empowering women? Okay, okay. Um, okay, I'm just digesting the question. How are women empowered as when we say we are empowering women? So correct me if I'm wrong. Do you mean that by just having the conversation that we're empowering women, how are we actually empowering women beyond conversation? I just want to make sure that I have the question right. I'll let the person follow up. Okay, D, if you have any thoughts on um, what the question means, that would also be helpful.
I think you have it right. How does the conversation of women empowerment actually empower women? I think we've
Mm-hmm.
touched on it earlier, but there's a further explanation.
Okay. It's mhm.
You can go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was just going to read it out. So I would support what has been said, and additionally to what we need to give reports, what has been done, and the impacts to the women not only looking for funding to make profit or pocketing money on that empowerment. Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing is that just also taken from this question that now it's fashionable to be a feminist or to you know be pro black and to create spaces to be radical. It's the cool thing now, and so a lot of there's there's a lot that doesn't come from that warm intention of creating spaces that we also start to see in the space. And it's yeah, it's hurtful that it might not create the full impact. But just going to the question of how are women empowered, as when we just by saying empowering women, is that at least what I've seen in our community, even though sometimes it might not be, direct, but just creating a space that's dedicated to women such as Tiwale, having a center. Also, the way we saw a shift in our community. So Malawi we had our first female president in 2015, 2016. And she was vice president, and so when we lost our president, she automatically became president. And it was 2 years. But what we saw at Tiwale was that just by seeing her as commander in chief of the country, we saw people shift in terms of what they wanted to be in life. Just people shifted from, oh, I want to start a very small business selling rice or small food, to, oh, I want to go into cars and going across borders and importing and selling at home. And we saw large shifts from people wanting to be a nurse, which is brilliant, but also wanting to specialize more, like, oh yeah, maybe neurosurgeon, this and that. And so as much as they can be the wrong intention behind quote unquote empowering women, as some spaces say, but we can't undermine just how important also the conversation and this creating that space and seeing figures can do for a community, can do for people with low access to information. Okay, there's another question which says, you mentioned earlier that for people who identify as women, it is much harder to exist in spaces and to receive support for causes. related to empowerment. Is the situation different when people do not identify as women but who are advocating for the same? Um, yeah, I mean, it depends on how you identify, but if we're talking about do cis men have better access to resources, to income opportunities, to financing than cis women, then yes, yes, and just yeah, than women in general, yes, absolutely. So that's what I would say to that question.
Great. I mean, I am very much enlightened by this, and I really do believe that everyone that has joined us feels the same way. So, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for leading this very needed and very necessary conversation. I think, lastly, I would just ask you to maybe share with people how they can reach you, and yeah, then we will call it a day.
Okay. No, thank you so much, and I am so happy that this conversation was somewhat insightful. So I appreciate that. Ways to reach me. So to reach Tiwale, go to www.tiwale tiwale.org, tiwale.org, and then for me, my handle, I'm really good via social. It's at Chmba at CHMBA underscore. And so, oh yeah, I can type it in the chat. Just, yeah. But that's the best way to reach me. Tiwale.org and at Chmba underscore. And I would love to keep having these conversations because I'm a nerd.
No, thank you so much. I will also share that on the Facebook live stream. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you on the next AMI webinar.
Thank you. So bye.
Bye.